Hello everyone, it's actually Saturday and it's 10 to 3 almost, and it's actually my 25th wedding anniversary next Wednesday, and I thought I may as well use this opportunity not only to hopefully inspire you to create a card, but hopefully just give you a couple of techniques or a couple of ideas. And I thought, instead of just making the card, why not do a video at the same time, and then it's a win-win situation. Hopefully you get inspired and I create an anniversary card at the same time. Now, this is an off-the-cuff demo, no plan. I've literally got some numbers which say 25 obviously, and I've got a few stamps that I've literally just gathered really quickly. So just to prove that it doesn't matter what stamps you use, you can create a simple card in a relatively easy few steps. So what I've got first is I've got my Measure It Up stamp set, the border stamp set. Let me see if I've got the packaging. Yes, I have. So I've got my border stamp set, and it's stamp set 235, and it's all measured up, I think it's called. Right, we'll just move that out the way so that we've got some space. Hopefully I won't take over the whole of my desk, which is what I normally do. And what I'm going to do is, I thought, with it being a silver wedding anniversary, I'd stick, because it's for my husband, I would stick to sort of blues and silvers, that kind of tone. So I'm going to use the measured up stamp, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a touch of the stamp. I thought the ruler was quite apt to sort of keep it still a bit masculine, because this could be feminine or masculine, but obviously to prove that my stamp designs are not just for one, you know, just for female, just for teenagers, just for anybody. It's varied. You can use them in lots of varied ways, and that's what I'm hoping anyway. So we'll see how this card comes together. So as you can see, I've used Distress Oxides, Blueprint Sketch and Broken China, and I've applied those simply randomly onto my stamp set. And what I'm going to do is stamp it onto an elongated piece of card. And this card is 4 inches in width by 7¼ inches in length. And I'm using 300 GSM smooth card. And I either use the reverse of Centura Pearl or I use Pink Frog. And I want this to give a random feel to my background, like so. And just look at that. Just stamped like that. And I just think, wow, it's beautiful. And all that is 2 colours. If I just lift that up, 2 colours randomly with the ruler stamp. And it's just so lovely to go back and use some of the older stamps for me. I just think, wow. Right, what I've done here is I've cut out a heart from Mount Board. I haven't got a die. Obviously, if you've got one of the thick Sizzix dies or any other make die that's one of the big dies, you could cut that out of Mount Board quite easily. I did this by hand and then sanded it. Phew, that was hard work, trust me, doing it by hand. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add my Distress Oxide direct. So this is Broken China, and I'm adding this direct to my heart. Not my personal heart, obviously, but to the heart that I've cut out. So I've literally just cut out a heart out of Mount Board, and what I did to get the shape of my heart, I literally used a piece of scrap paper, folded it in half and then did a heart shape. And if you do it that way, you get a perfect heart shape that matches both sides. So that's what I did to get my heart shape. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just bringing a few pieces in while I remember. Bring a piece of scrap paper in as well. What I'm going to do is add some touches of the Blueprint Sketch as well. Just add some light touches of the Blueprint Sketch. And it's very random. You don't want it to be, you want it to sort of look a bit cloudy, a bit marbled, that kind of look. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what it looks like, because I'm literally going to apply some clear embossing powder over the top. And I'm using a Wow embossing powder. Now, if you were doing this properly, you would use an ultra thick embossing powder, because that way you would use less embossing powder because the granules are thicker. But I don't have that. I don't have any in my cupboard, so I'm using what I've got. I'm a great believer in using what I've got and using products that I've got. So I'm literally using the Wow embossing powder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build the layers up. And I'm not in a rush to do the video. The video lasts as long as it lasts. You can easily fast forward the bits that you're not interested in. So I'm literally going to just heat this, and then I'm going to apply a few layers of ink. Sorry, a few layers of embossing powder. It's because I'm looking at the ink and that I just said ink straight away then. So I'm just going to apply a few layers of the embossing powder. And if I do this right, I can just layer the embossing powder straight over the top, because it'll still be nice and hot. And because it's nice and hot, that means it's still sticky. So then I can apply the embossing powder. Now, if you're a little bit slower and you don't get it while it's hot, don't worry, you can just apply the Versamark ink pad straight over the top, and then you can apply the embossing powder again that way. So it's not a problem either way. So I'm just going to heat this, and we will apply a few layers, but I wanted to do this card from start to finish just so that you can see how it progresses. Sometimes I think it's nice to see how something progresses from start to finish, rather than just rush the process and say, here's one done that I did before. Sometimes it's nice to see, and then if I make mistakes, you can see how I correct those mistakes. So I'm just again heating that to make sure it's nice and hot, and adding another layer of the embossing powder. Tip off the excess, and then I can tip the extra back into the pot. I've only got a small craft room, so sometimes things get in the way. So I'm just going to heat that. And again, just applying those layers with the embossing powder. And I'll keep adding these layers until I'm happy with the depth. Now, if you were using an ultra thick embossing powder and an enamel, then after 3 layers you would have plenty of embossing powder. You'd be absolutely fine. I'd probably add another layer because this is a finer embossing powder. But if you've got that ultra thick embossing powder, then you'll be absolutely fine with 3 layers, and then you can stamp into it. I haven't got any of that left, so I'm just using my clear fine embossing powder from Wow. And because it's a fine embossing powder, I need to add a few more layers. But I'm making, in another way, I'm making sure I use my product. It's not standing on the shelf, not being used. So I'm a great believer, if I've got it in the cupboard, then I'll see if I can adapt a technique and see if I can use it. So I'm just adapting it with a fine embossing powder. No problem at all. I can still get the same effect. So just put that over there. And because this is the last layer, what I'm going to do is get a few things ready. What I've got here is my stamp set 350, which is splattered numbers. Do you know, I don't think I've got the packaging here. I have that many things on my cupboard. But those of you that follow me anyway know exactly what I'm like. I have stacks of things on my cupboard, and they're not quite. Oh, we've got the packaging. So we're using stamp set 350 splattered numbers, which is an A7 stamp set. And I'm going to stamp into that thick powder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink the stamp up with actually, do I want VersaFine Clair, or do I? That might be a bit dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink it up with the Distress Oxide, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't work, I'll just heat it up again. I'm going to use the Blueprint Sketch. So I've inked my stamp with the Blueprint Sketch. Just move it out the way while I heat the powder. So I'm just heating that powder just until it melts. And hopefully you can see that on camera. Some of it just flirts off because obviously you've got a thicker layer, but that's okay, that's not a problem at all. And before you stamp into the powder, there's a couple of things you need to remember for it to work. One, you need enough powder if you're not using an ultra thick powder. If you're using an ultra thick powder, you don't have the same problem. If you're using those embossing powders that you don't like the colour of and you're using them up, you need to make sure that you've got a thick enough layer of the embossing powder. You also need to make sure that when you stamp your stamp into the molten powder, you need to make sure it's hot enough. If it isn't hot enough, you won't get that indentation that you're looking for. So you do need to make sure of that. So I'm just giving this a good heat. You also need to make sure that you've got a good quality stamp. A good quality stamp made from good quality photopolymer, and that it can be used with these heat techniques. I design for All and Create, and I know what the stamps are made from, so I know that these stamps can take that. So I'm just giving this a good heat, as you can see, some of it's overflowing. That is not a problem at all. And then I'm just going to press my stamp into that molten powder. And I'm just pressing very lightly just to make sure I get some indentation from that powder. So now when it's not, you know, quite as molten, I can press a little bit harder. And what you need to do is just let that cool a little bit. Just let it cool a bit before you remove it. And I can just lift this up. Let me just lift this up off my non-stick craft sheet, which means it peels away. And as you can see, the stamp is there on the mount board. So it's very hot. And what you need to do is just make sure that that cools down a little bit, just so that it peels off nicely. And what you can do then is you just peel your stamp away. And this is what you get. And what you can do while it's still warm, just to maintain some of that shape, where it's gone over your heart and it's melted, because it's still warm, I can cut away some of those bits that are overhanging. If you want to keep those bits for added texture, then brilliant, just keep them. But I want it to look like a proper heart, not a deformed heart. So I want it to look like it looks like a heart, so it's not misshapen. You might want that look, but obviously on this occasion I don't. I'm just going to wipe up a little bit, just because I've got that embossing powder everywhere, like you do when you're creating. So what I've got now is let me just hold that up to camera. As you can see now, I've got that embedded in there, and you can see the paler colour and you can see the darker colour. Now let's bring that to life a little bit more. We can bring that to life a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Pebeo wax, my silver wax. Obviously silver, because it's a silver wedding anniversary. So I'm just going to go over with my, and what you tend to do with the wax, don't dip your finger into the wax and then go straight on. Take off the excess onto your non-stick craft sheet and then go to your substrate. So take your wax, dab the excess off, and then go to your substrate. And that brings it to life a little bit more. I just love that. So I'm just going to just wipe this up. Obviously you would use the rest of it just to make sure it's used. And I'm just going to bring in my card just so I can decide what I'm going to do. So this is what I'm thinking, is the heart will go here like this. Just love that. And then what I'm thinking is 25 will go sort of, I will rearrange it so it's sort of like this, so it's overlaid, so it looks sort of nice. But obviously we've got to do something with those 2 and the 5. So let's just pull that out the way. And let's bring in the 2 and the 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the broken china directly to the numbers, just so that they're coloured in exactly the same way. Now, I could do these with ultra thick as well, but I don't think I'm going to do that with these, just so there's not too much of one element within the card. You could use your cut and dry foam. You could use your cut and dry foam to do this. I'm just applying it direct because it applies a nice layer of ink directly to the numbers. So I'm just applying it direct with the ink pad, just because it applies that ink a little bit quicker. Now, if we bring in this heart and a piece of the cut and dry foam, we can just go round those edges of that heart, just to make sure that it's got a professional finish, just so we look like, you know, that we've thought about the design and that we're taking our time to give it a professional finish. So I'm just applying the broken china around the edges of my heart. It sounds like I'm talking about my own heart, and I'm not. So just give that a dry, because we've used a Distress Oxide ink pad, and because it's a Distress Oxide, that's a pigment dye fusion, and because of that pigment element, it stays wetter longer. So just give that a little dry. So on the numbers, it doesn't matter so much about the white, but oh, we don't want that sticker, do we? Let's remove that sticker from the back. But I don't want those white edges. So just, it's okay having a little bit of that white showing, but just colour some of it, just so it looks a little bit more professional. It looks a bit more finished for me. So I'm just going to go round there like so. Just applying that around there. And my husband always appreciates a handmade card, so he knows that I'm always rushed off my feet, and sometimes I haven't got time to make for family, which is a shame really. So I thought today I'd make the effort, and then you can be part of it as well. You can be part of the process. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my blueprint sketch, and I'm going to use the all measured up again, and I'm going to add some of the numbers from the measuring tape onto my numbers, because then it coordinates with the background. Can you see? You've got some little touches there, and those numbers will coordinate with the background on my card. So just add a few more numbers. Yes, see, they're just lovely numbers. You can keep adding as much or as little as you want, and I'm quite happy with that. Just give that a dry. What you could do, in fact, we could just add one layer. We're not going to stamp into it, but so that you've got that glossy finish, we could apply a layer of the clear embossing powder. Just, it'll probably take 2 layers, but we can just apply that over the 2 and the 5. And obviously I'm thinking, as I'm creating this card, I'm thinking at the same time as creating of what process I want to do. So I'm adding that clear over the top. Move your ink pads out of the way so you don't dry those ink pads. And just adding, I'll probably add a couple of layers just so it's got a glossy tile-like finish. Just to finish these off, just so that these look like they tie in. I'm thinking about the fact that the stamping in the background is going to coordinate with the stamping on these numbers, and obviously the embossing will coordinate with the embossing on the heart, but obviously I'm not going to stamp into these. I'm just giving it a simple clear embossed finish. That's all I'm doing. So we just move those out the way, just tip off the excess, just tip that back into my pot. I hope you all talk to yourself. I mean, I know I'm talking to the camera, but I hope I'm not the only one that talks to themselves. So I'm just going to heat those up. And these should work quite nicely with those numbers. I will lift these up so that you can see the detail. So I'm just giving that and making sure that it's melted and there's no indentations. So I'll just do one at a time. And then we can move that one out the way. I'm just heating until it's nice and smooth. See a few indentations, so I'm just heating that until it's nice and smooth, and then going on to my number 2. So we're just melting that, and it just gives it a nice glass tile-like finish, just so that it coordinates with the heart. And once those have cooled down, I will hold those up. While those are cooling down, let me just bring in what I'm thinking. So I've got an old dictionary here. So what I thought was, not that, actually no, I can almost see the writing's that small. So let's try and find heart. I'm going to need my magnifying glass at this, I think. It might be on that page. So where's the hearty heart, and we want the word heart. There you go. So in the dictionary is the word heart. So I can cut out the heart, just a little bit of text, just here, just to add to my design. So you've got the bit of text there that says heart, and if you want, you can even add all the other details, but I just want that word heart. Nice use of maybe an old dictionary. So I'm just using an old dictionary just to add that word, just moving that out of the way because I've got everything everywhere. And now I can hold these up, and they do hold the heat quite a lot, but hopefully you can see that stamp detail underneath the embossing. Right, let's bring in our elements that we've got. I'm just going to reach for some adhesive because I want a thicker adhesive, so I need my gel medium. So I'm just bringing my gel medium into play. And what I'm thinking is, why don't we add some wire? I've got some soft wire to add to my heart, and it's really soft wire this is. But I just thought this will bring in some more of that silver element because it's a silver wedding anniversary. Just thought, oops, sorry, I've just nudged the camera. Told you it was a small craft room, didn't I? Sorry about that, I just nudged that. So what I'm thinking then is this will go here. And I do love that. I love that. I love it sort of offset against that pattern of the measuring tape. Do you know, I've picked a package up and it's not opened. Why when you're doing a video or you're doing a live, you pick one up that's not actually physically opened? You can always rely on me to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some of this thick gel medium just behind the heart, and I'm just going to add that there like so. Just perfect. I just love that. And what I'm going to do is just play around with these numbers a little bit. You see, you could have them there. I like having a cluster. I just like having a cluster. So I'm going to play around a little bit. You see, I like that. You've got to be careful where you put it because obviously it won't lie flat. So you've got to think where you put it. So I think the number 2 is going to go there. So the number 2, I think once we've got one of the elements down, then the other element will work in beautifully. So just tuck the number 2 in there. And don't worry if you've got a little bit of adhesive that you've squashed out, just pick it up like so. I just pick it up and then I use my fingers just to remove the excess. I can't have any adhesive, but sometimes when you're using the ultra thick gel, it's very easy just to squish it out when you press it. So I just make sure that none of that is showing because we don't want that showing. So I just spend a few moments just making sure that I've got all that neat and tidy, just so that it doesn't show below. Obviously what you need to do is make sure you don't press down too much and then you don't get that. So there's my 2. You see, I could have it so it's really high up then, and then I'd have it in a box. But I think I'm going to have it so it's slightly underneath the heart, like so that it's 25. It's got, the number's got to be this way so it looks like 25. I don't like how it's leaning against there, so I'm going to place it underneath. And this time I'll remember not to add quite as much adhesive. But obviously I'm creating this live and you can see exactly what I'm doing and how I'm creating and how the process works when I create off the cuff, just so that you can see it as well. So I can see a bit of adhesive. What I'm going to do is place this under here, that's better, and just press that lightly so it adheres. Just make sure that you've got no adhesive. I do think it's worthwhile just making sure you've got none of that adhesive. Just going to wipe my hands now, because one of the mistakes we all make is when we're using white card, our hands become filthy. So then we leave marks. So I'm just cleaning my hands just to make sure that I don't leave no marks on that. Just like so. If you weren't creating this as an anniversary card, you could even, just to give you some different ideas, you could even sit one of the paper dolls on the top like this. Can you see? so you could sit one of the paper dolls if you weren't making it for an anniversary card. I'm making it for an anniversary card, so I want it to be a little bit more masculine. So I'm just having a look at my embellishments. I've got some of these embellishments here. Let me just move the packaging out the way, which is very irritating on a video. So just move that packaging out the way. And what I'm thinking is just adding a little embellishment here, just so it looks just a little bit more detailed. I just love the detail. I just think it looks a little bit more attention to detail. And it just says inventory check. And Ian, my husband, knows that I love adding quirky touches. So if I didn't add a little quirky touch, as if the heart wasn't quirky enough, if I didn't add a little quirky touch, my husband would think I'd lost the plot. He knows I always add quirky touches, but he understands that and he appreciates that. He appreciates that's my taste. Obviously, sometimes when you're making cards, you do have to make to the taste of the recipient. So what I've got here is, if I just hold that up, I've got the dictionary definition of heart. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place this here. I just think that's a lovely little touch. So we'll just get that. Of course, now I can't pick it up, as you can see, when you're on camera. So let's make sure I've got it the right way. So just add a little bit of adhesive. Again, when you're using these little strips of paper, just make sure you don't add too much adhesive. And of course, my adhesive doesn't want to work live on camera. So let's try again. Now we've just got rid of that little bit that was stuck in. Oh, you can always spot when somebody's glue doesn't work. Luckily, I've got a little needle here, so I can just do the glue so that that's sorted. I always have a needle ready, just so that I can clear the glue should that happen. I'll pick it up again for the third time. Makes great watch, this does, when you're watching live. But it works every time if you clear it. So you just need a little bit of adhesive. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that heart here like so. Just move it so it's straight. Like so. Just use my scissors and make sure that we've got no extra adhesive. I always take my time when I'm making the cards because I want them to look professional. I don't want them to look like we haven't thought about what we're making, especially when you're giving it to somebody, you know, that means a lot to you. So you want to make sure that's all sorted. I'm just going to get an index clip, just reaching over my cupboard just to get an index clip because I just want to finish it off nicely. So I'm just using an index clip, and that index clip is going to go here just before the word heart. So I'm going to place that there just to add that index clip. And I'm keeping that white space because it gives me some freshness. It gives me some freshness to the design. I'm not going to be adding this to a black layer. I want to keep it so that it keeps that freshness. And I'm going to add some white splatters just because with the blue, I think the white splatters will just finish it off nicely. Especially if your pen works, you know, if your pen works live on video, it's great. So I'm just adding some of those splatters. I'm adding the splatters to every part of my room apart from my artwork, but there you go, that's all part of adding splatters. So let's now add this to a card blank, and this card blank is 4 1/4 by 7 1/2. Just remove that hair. And just bring this in so you can see what this is going to look like. And I'm adding that to a white card blank because I don't want to add it to a black layer because I want to keep that freshness. But hopefully you can see all that detail from the background stamping, the stamping that's in the heart and the stamping that's on the numbers. So hopefully you can see that okay. And I hope you enjoyed that video. And I will be back shortly. Bye.